And we are back. Look at that. I'm shiny. I got a
Yeah.
the the universe is shining down on me. Welcome to Rhetoric Warriors podcast. We are back again with episode 2 of Dan from Seattle. We talked for about an hour and 15 minutes last time with Dan, who is a Trump voter this year in 2020, and we're going to pick that back up and explore some more. Again, just to orient you, Rhetoric Warriors from rhetoricwarriors.com is a movement and a brand. We are out to train America how to persuade America. I don't think most people have much training in persuasion. We receive a lot of it, especially through the media, but we don't really understand it deeply. So I I sometimes summarize it as complicated times require sophisticated techniques. So that's sort of my goal in life, is to increase sophistication out there. I'm Dr. Dan French, a rhetoric PhD, longtime college professor. I escaped the the university. I'm now a talker and normal explorer of things. The podcast is set up. We typically do three things on the podcast. I talk to people from some political orientation. Often it's from some different political orientation than probably what I would be. I guess I'm liberal. I don't really organize myself in that way. Then I talk to people who have some background in something that'll help us understand politics and persuasion these days. And I talk to comedians, just straight up. Let's see what those people think. And you can go to rhetoricwarriors.com. We have paid courses there, and we also have a lot of free stuff. There's a free webinar series that fits with what we're doing with Dan today, and I call it Transforming MAGA. Um, and it's basically just, if you are interested in talking to the right and seeing if you can make inroads into the right, this is going to train you how to do that. At some point, I'll do inroads to the left as well, because it's all about persuasion. So our last episode, we talked to Dan for a while about his background, a little bit about why he voted for Trump, what his political experience was. And just to recap, if I can, real quickly, Dan considers himself somebody who looks across the spectrum, has done a lot of liberal things over the years, has been to a lot of liberal rallies, including the Pink Hat rally, which I thought was kind of interesting. And now has voted this last time for Trump. And I think he's a thinker. I think Dan, I've known Dan from Seattle for a long time. And my view of Dan is that he's a thinker. So I'm really curious as to how, a thinker gets to the decision to vote for Trump this year. So everybody, welcome back. Dan from Seattle.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan, and thanks. That's high praise from anyone, but especially coming from you. That's my only goal, is to be a thinker, and believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And I know that we have a lot of competing information out there, and including the buzzword of 2020, misinformation. Well, we'll just say buzzword of the last 4 years. Misinformation, disinformation, lots of sowing of discord and disharmony. All these things we've heard.
A lot of disses.
Lots of disses, yes.
Disses and misses.
Yes, absolutely. So just a little quick recap of my thought process, because we're all dealing with incomplete, flat out wrong information, incomplete information, wrong information, biased information, contextually false information, and everyone has an agenda. I mean, I think we can all agree that no matter who we're talking about, whatever information source we are looking at, there is no one source of truth. And therefore, which is not to say that there is no truth from any source. It's just that there's no way, in my mind, to trust any source completely. So therefore, I have to look critically at what I'm hearing, being told, and parse out what I feel is more or less true. And also, I can't listen to just one side, because by definition, I would be underinformed. Because if I'm only listening to one side of an issue, then there's a whole other side. There's always at least one other side. And so I listen, I strive to listen to as many sides as there are. And there's no way to do that completely. But I figure if I take this approach and try to use critical thinking, and consider multiple sides to an argument, then I'm more likely to arrive at an outcome that is um, closer to what I would hope for if we're talking about elections, and closer to truth if I'm trying to determine um, what the truth is about a certain topic. So, and which leads us to when it comes to voting and choosing Trump this time. I voted for Hillary last time. We're starting from flawed politicians. They're all humans are flawed. So if we can start understand, no one's perfect. No one's going to match our exact viewpoint. And also, by voting for someone, we are not. There's no way to consider that endorsing everything they say or do, or have said or have done. There's no way, because you know, you can always find something in someone's past that you categorically are against, and so we are forced to choose. If we choose to vote, we're forced to choose between what's the least worst of these decisions, and it is not a for me who I choose. It's not an endorsement of everything they've done or said, who they are as a person. Certainly, I'm just trying to pick the best person for the job, who will do the best for the country, and um, and I did choose Trump because I felt like that was the case. I felt like he
Okay,
would
let's
take
dig
us
into
a
that a little
direction.
bit. Let's
Yeah,
let's jump in there a little bit. So when you say you look at Trump, and a lot of people did this, I think, with Trump towards, the as the election got closer and closer. One of the things I saw that came out as a persuasion plank, as I would call it, or a girder, persuasion theme, is to not look at his obnoxious personality and the things that he says in public, but look, I guess, at his policies or the things that he's done, and create that split so that his obnoxiousness doesn't keep you from voting for things that you would vote for. Is that what you found true?
absolutely. Yeah, because I have the choice of voting for the person who I feel has the best character, who's the most polite and friendly. And by the way, those qualities don't automatically mean they're going to be a great leader. Sometimes you want an asshole. I mean, if you're in a court case, you want an attorney who's an asshole, who will fight for you hard and look for every trick in the book. So yes, I separate the two out. I try to, and look
It's
at,
an,
hey, what is this
when
person
did you
most
get to
likely
that?
to do?
When did you get to that persuasive decision to allow that split? Because that's a decision.
Absolutely. Well, because it would be stupid for me to make a decision that would ultimately be bad for me just because I like someone as a person. And plenty of horrible people who do horrible things are very pleasant to have a beer with. Now, does that mean that they don't go, I'm sure that Jeffrey Dahmer, well, that may be a bad example, but Jeffrey Dahmer,
No, I think it's perfect. I think
he could have
Trump
been
is
a
the
wonderful
Dahmer of
neighbor.
politics.
Yeah, he's certainly characterized that way. But Jeffrey Dahmer may have been a completely wonderful neighbor. If you live next to him, he may not have. He always kept his yard manicured, and he brought your newspaper for you, and he
So
never played
you
the
don't
music
trust your
loud.
instincts about a
Oh,
person,
instincts are notoriously liars.
are they? You don't feel
Look
like you
at
have good
love.
intuition about people?
Well, I don't think I can rely on my gut if that's what you're asking.
No, I mean your intuition. Intuition isn't just
Yes, but
flail
where
in
does
the wind. It's
intuition
you
come
look at
from? It's
things
shaped.
and you
It's
think, okay,
shaped.
I believe based on what I see. It's not a completely irrational thing.
Yeah, I agree.
So
But
you don't trust your intuition about Trump.
if we're just, how would you define intuition? Is it just your, like, my opinion of him as the person,
Yeah, if we're
like
just
what I've
splitting these,
gathered?
like you want to do, and this is a rhetorical move that you're doing. You're splitting things apart so that you can make a decision based on two different things. You're not looking at a holistic. And a lot of people will do this in order to make decisions easier. So you've taken his personality completely off the table as a decision factor.
Not completely, because I mean, he is the chief diplomat of our country. I mean, the president is. They represent us. They are the face of our country. So, if he was like spitting in people's face, foreign leaders, that's a personality quality that I would say is not conducive to running our country well and taking us a direction we would want to go.
But you don't think
Um,
he did that?
no, I don't think he's done that. And
You,
we've
you
had
don't
4
think
years,
he put off other leaders? He offended other leaders?
not to the point where it's hurting us as a country. Do you have an example? Is there a measurable harm that Trump has done in 4 years? Measurable harm.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Okay, I understand what you're asking for there. Like you're putting the proof point back on me.
Well, but if
Can I
it, but
can I
yeah,
prove
go
that
ahead.
he's done harm? I would say, the reaction at the G8 meetings and most of the foreign meetings that he's been to have been negative from other leaders.
Okay. Have we lost something as a country because of a negative feeling or reaction by foreign leaders?
Well, what do you mean lost?
Well, what is the harm? It sounds like you're saying that the negative reaction is the negative reaction itself the harm? Like somebody didn't like meeting with him or would rather that someone more polite was there at the meeting? Or is there something beyond the unpleasantness that other world leaders may experience around Trump that is ultimately the bad part about him being obnoxious?
Well, let's take whatever criteria we're going to use to start to judge this, like our standing in the world community. I'd say is lower than when Bush was there, or when Clinton was there, or when Obama was there.
How would we measure that, though?
Well, I'm not sure we need to measure it. Like, I don't know if we have to have a quantitative.
If it's harmful, it should be measurable harm. Because if it's intangible, then how can we tell that it's bad? And if so, how bad is it?
Well, you can't get quantitative evidence on everything, but you can definitely get qualitative evidence on things. There's plenty of statements around the world from leaders and the people who are watching us from other countries that Trump has lowered our standing in the world qualitatively. Like there's qualitative evidence of that. There probably is somebody who's done some sort of quantitative study on it because they like numbers so much, but there's definitely qualitative evidence of that.
Well, if that was the case, then maybe people would no longer want to move to America. What does standing mean? It seems like it's a most desired country that lots of other people want to go to. It seems like that should reflect somehow in either people's desire to live and work here or immigrate here or to use our money or to let us in their countries to, collaborate or to do business you can make a long list of objective things that it would seem to me should be affected if our quote standing is lower.
Well, let's back out of this one a little bit, because once you go down to evidence trails, we'll get trapped down in here. Nobody's really, sort of done what you've said, which is do a quantitative measurement of this qualitative conclusion that a lot of people have reached, that having an obnoxious or noxious personality as a leader is going to cause problems with other countries. That's the statement, right? And you want proof of it before you'll accept it, is what I hear.
Well, I want to know how bad it is because I need to do risk analysis. So there's, yes, he may be obnoxious, but does his obnoxiousness gain him in another area? Like, nothing is ever pure in its effect. Like, because he's a bully, he may get stuff for us that Obama couldn't, for example. I'm just making stuff up, but you can see that there's a risk analysis here. So I want to know what the cost is. I want to know what the benefit is. And if I can't quantify the cost of it, then how can I do my risk analysis?
Yeah, again, like if you want to do quantitative persuasion, like you want some type of organized, measurable, distinct evidence in order to, data in order to make your decisions, you're going to run into a problem all over the place because that's not delivered across very many locations, especially in politics. You're not going to get that.
Sure. But at the same time, that's if that's the case, then I'm just going to value that. I'm going to lower that risk in my mind if it's hard to come up with any demonstrable harm. And it is going to be, in my mind, I'm going to weight that harm of him being obnoxious less than if there was a clear harm to it. Does that make sense? So
for sure. Again, like in this sort of rational model that you're building for yourself, absolutely, that would totally make sense.
Now, would I prefer that he was an elegant statesman and the world loved him, like John F. Kennedy, for example, or even Ronald Reagan? You know, I mean, there are plenty of presidents who are beloved. Would I prefer that? Absolutely, absolutely. But we kind of don't have that, and I mean, I don't feel like I would have gotten that from Biden. You know, I mean,
Okay, so
Biden's
let's jump to the other side of your statement here about the his policies you think are more in line with what you want or what you think is good for the country. Pull out
right.
a policy that you think he's had that, and let's play the persuasion or logic game with that.
He has proven over 4 years to be less interventionalist militarily, and that's a big one for me. I don't think we should be. I mean, we killed 500,000 women and children in Iraq based on non-existent weapons of mass destruction. I mean, and then we
That
just
was
said,
another
"Oops."
Republican, right?
Oh, I don't care about whose side it is. I'm saying it was wrong, whoever did it. So yes, I'm independent. So I'm not picking a side here. I'm just picking between two candidates. And one candidate, I mean, Biden was on the side of invasion, and so I'm looking. If I look at the evidence that we have, and there is evidence, and Trump has given us more. He's pulling us out of Afghanistan. Guess what? My brother's in Afghanistan. I'm glad he's coming home. I don't want him in harm's way. We've been there 20 years? Have we? And that's another, I believe, huge myth that we've been sold, is that our country is in constant danger of invasion or being overrun by enemies, when that is not the case.
So you don't think the world's
Eisenhower.
you don't think the world's dangerous and that we need to do, at
Oh, hell
least
yes,
somewhat
it's dangerous.
interventions here and there.
Yes, it's not a binary yes or no. It's on a scale, and but the danger we have as a, our own continent bordered by water on three sides, and with friendly neighbors on both sides, and neighbors that we could easily control or manipulate if it came down to it. Our risk compared to you know Africa, where they have all these warring factions and tribes, and their neighbors are all flighty and sketchy. I mean, so the relative risk is minuscule,
The
and not
risk
to
of being
mention
attacked.
risk of being attacked. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So if we're talking about that kind of danger, and that is the military danger, is the one I'm specifically talking about here, as far as how I view Trump. Now, let me tell you what I disagree with Trump on: is more funding of the military. So he's pulling us out of Afghanistan, Syria, all of which were screamed about by the left. Oh no, the left, the loving left, wants us having all these wars, and
Well,
Trump's pulling us
let's
out.
hold on to that one just a second, because that characterization, when we start moving back and forth, right? And I like the fact that you're picking a specific topic and it's important to you. You said this kind of before because you went to peace rallies and you felt that nothing ever changed. As soon as the
Yeah,
election
yeah.
happened, everybody abandoned the peace movement, and until the next major thing flames up.
Right.
So military action is very important to you, apparently, in this
Uh,
decision.
Killing fewer brown people is important to me. Yes.
Okay, so but it's okay. Like you don't think we have, as the dominant economy and culture in the world, an obligation to go into some of these other countries that we sell to, that we've exploited over the years, that we've been involved in their politics, and do any kind of peacekeeping or cleanup. Uh, you don't see any kind of role for America for that.
Not true at all. Not my feeling at all. So there's, again, we're talking on a matter of scale here. So if we need, do we need, how many brown people is it acceptable to kill to support our country, our companies in other countries? Or
Well, we'll kill
uh,
we'll kill whatever color you got, and we kill plenty of white
yeah,
people
but if
across
you look at
history
the
too.
breakdown, it's mostly brown people. It's mostly poor
Recently,
brown people.
I mean, but if you look in the world wars and things like that, white people kill white people too. But I totally agree with this idea that we go into other cultures that we don't really have anything to do with, other than financial obligation, or a lot of times some kind of deep political connection. And we start wars, or we enact military interventions.
Yes, I agree. I agree. So yes, there's risk. Yes, we have a security concern, obviously. In fact, I think security should be our top concern for any leader of any country is keep your people as safe as you can. Now, we're way beyond that. In how many countries? You know how many countries we are actively killing people in right now?
Probably quite a few.
Yeah. Now, how many of them are a direct threat to us?
Well, is that your criteria though? Is it direct threat or is it keeping order in that country so they don't become a direct threat or
So,
or a
like,
problem?
yeah, maybe we're even helping them by bringing them, bombing the democracy into them.
Yeah,
And
I
that
don't
was
know. I'm
always,
not I'm not defending the policy, like military policy and world policing and all that stuff isn't my area. What I'm trying to get
yeah,
to is this sense of, again, from a rhetoric perspective and a persuasion perspective, you've landed on this one, and I can tell that it's you're passionate about it, right?
oh,
That
yeah,
it's important to your vote. So
yeah.
when you see Biden, who or Kamala Harris, and their teams that they're putting together for national security and all this stuff, do you not feel as safe as Trump, who is less stable than these guys?
Oh, okay. That's an interesting way to put it. So, yeah, Trump definitely comes across as less stable. In answer to your question, um, I feel safe personally, whoever is running, if no matter whether it was President Harris or President Trump. I call her President Harris because, again, my prediction is she'll be the sitting president in a year or less. But anyway, all that aside, I feel equally safe with either of them. Again, because I don't feel like we're in any direct risk here in the continental United States. We have just look at the risk of outside invasion here. And there are numbers. I'm sure there are. We are not at risk, and
Yeah,
it
that's
and you
small. I think everybody would agree that's very
yeah.
small.
So I personally feel safe. Now, the bigger issue for me is worth we put on how little worth we put on the lives of people in other countries. Now, let's talk about standing in the global community. I mean, that's got to count for something. It's the body count.
Sure, we're the biggest colonial country in the history of the world, so there's going to be a body count.
Absolutely. But we shouldn't just say, okay, we're going to have a body count, so whatever it is good. That's not me.
Yeah, but
I'm
I
not
don't
just
think
willing
that's
to
what
accept that.
I don't think that's what the left says. I think the left Democrats say, yeah, there's going to be interventions like this. There's going to be body count. You try to keep that down, but the only responsible way to be the superpower in the world is to be involved in the world, and that is going
Yes.
to end up in military conflicts.
So, I mean, how are we supposed to know? I mean, is 20 years long enough to be in Afghanistan? Apparently not.
Yeah, I don't know how long were the Russians there. they,
Yeah.
they
So
got
we
stuck there
had
too.
them as an excellent example of why the fuck you should never go into Afghanistan. And yet we did it. And now we're there for 20
Yeah, but
years.
we
Is
were
that right?
in we were in Afghanistan before the Russians got there. We've been doing stuff in Afghanistan for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. This is not just a Donald Trump or Joe Biden thing. This is one of the things, one of the areas I think we as a nation can absolutely improve in and improve in a ton, and just as global citizens, if
Yeah, I
that's
agree
all
with
you
all
want
that.
to look
I
at it.
think that's you get some good rationalism going on there. Um, let me jump a little bit to the idea again with Trump, because when I think the left sees Trump, they see noxious, obnoxious, and all that. But I think that is the safest characterization of him that I've heard. That he's just got an obnoxious personality. Ergo, you don't have to worry about it beyond that. Like categorizing that is again a rhetorical move. You've given me an ethos slot that's not that harmful. Noxious, obnoxious person versus all this stuff about like he has no loyalty to America, like the thing what he just did with Russia, where he canceled the open skies policy and is dismantling our reconnaissance planes so that Russia is going to be blind to NATO and everybody else because we're not going to spy on them. What do you think about that? Like if you're pulling out
Yeah.
his more of his more toxic personality, in rhetoric they call it ethos, right? So everybody's got an ethos. Here's the ethos that they want. Here's the ethos you want to stain them with. And in the middle is an ethos judgment that everybody's going to have on this person. I think most of America, the 80 million that just voted for Biden, landed on an incredibly toxic judgment of Donald Trump. Not just that he's, kind of obnoxious, but that he's dangerous. So
yeah.
talk about that. Why don't you see that?
Dangerous. So there's kind of two things. We'll talk about. I'm glad you brought up the NATO and the fly zone thing. So NATO seems to me, I'm not a history expert or anything, but it seems like a relic from back when Russia was an actual threat. A lot of people don't realize that Russia has an economy the size of Texas. The size of Texas.
Yeah, Texas doesn't have nukes.
It doesn't have nukes,
and
but an economy the size of Texas.
Propaganda.
Our military expenditures and capacity are something like 12 times. We spend our military something like 12 times the GDP of Russia. It's something crazy like that.
Yeah,
I'm quoting this wrong.
It's a crazy amount of money that we spend on our military. I totally agree with all this.
And not only that, but all the other nations who are supposedly at so much risk from Russia, since the Soviet Union days, they're all modernized and they are all cooperative. There's a European Union. So why do we have to protect Europe from Russia? From this, it's like saying, well, I don't have a good analogy for it, but it seems a little bit. It seems like it's an obsolete relic from a time when there was legitimate reason for NATO, but I just don't see any. I mean, I don't see any obvious, clear reasons that Russia is a threat certainly to us, but even less so. And then you're probably going to bring up Crimea, annexing Crimea, but Crimea, like at least half the country were glad to become part of Russia. So,
yeah,
but anyway,
again, like the content of politics and stuff, I don't follow closely. I'm like everybody else. I'm an intelligent person. I read about this stuff, but I don't deep dive on it.
yeah,
I don't know the history of, our connections to that stuff and what we're still getting out of NATO and why it's good. What I'm curious about is, again, the sort of stuff that gets you to a persuasive choice. So, I understand like that. Like you can rationally look at NATO and go, "That's been around a long time. It's obsolete." But Trump didn't do that. Trump came in like stomping boots and throwing shit everywhere about NATO and saying they hadn't paid for anything, and all that stuff. Just like it was a tantrum that he threw over NATO for some reason. And I doubt very much Trump has a student of history either. But his personality, again, the ethos of throwing a tantrum about this is going to have effect on people. Like all of a sudden NATO gets slandered in some ways. Most people never fucking thought about NATO in the last, like you said, 50 years. Like it's just been there. But all of a sudden Trump comes in, slanders it, and now we're suddenly trying to figure out whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, he's shaking the box. And I think that's he promised that in 2015. We all knew he was the disruptor. He promised this and he's delivered nonstop.
But disruption, there are many types of disruption, right? I mean, there's good disruption and there's just knee-jerk disruption. He just disrupts as his, policy.
Yeah. So you characterize his actions with NATO as a tantrum. I would say he just said, look, all you fellow NATO nations, y'all haven't, you're supposed to be paying 1 or 2% of your GDP to protect yourselves. And we've been doing it all. Almost, I mean, we've been doing the lion's share.
Yeah, but that's a fallacy. It's a straw man argument to say, ergo, NATO's got problems because, of these financial factors, and we don't even know what all that means. So
what we do know is that they have not been paying the amount of money towards their own protection that they promised to originally with NATO.
I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know how it's measured. I don't know what that means. I don't know why that would have happened.
You can Google it.
I know is Trump
very
looked
easy.
it up, and now people think they know something about it.
Well, here's what I know is, well, I say I know, But here are the undisputed facts, no matter which side you talk to. They are that most of the NATO nations have not kept up their end of that agreement. It was an agreement, and the idea was to keep Soviet Russia from attacking and taking over Europe. And the countries have stopped pitching in.
Yeah,
So
I don't know if
Trump
that's true,
pointed
Dan.
that
I
out.
don't know if I can give you that as a fact.
Oh,
What I
so
can
you
give
feel
you,
like
what I can give you is Trump suggested all of that, and now a certain amount of people believe it.
okay? So would you, if you saw agreed upon numbers from, say, the NATO website that said the contributions from all the countries, and you saw that it was supposed to be 2% of GDP, and you can easily check GDP, and you can say, oh, they're paying 0.5%, and now they're paying more. Would that be sufficient evidence for you?
Well, what I want to know is, again, sort of, so there's lots of levels of expertise and things, right? And this, you started by talking about the problems with information, and there are massive problems with information. So you're an intelligent
Agreed.
guy, and you've done some research on some different things, but you and I both are completely ignorant about this issue.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's no way, like for me, there's no way I would make a decision about it because I don't know anything about it.
Except, and I'm with you 100%, except that there are undisputed facts. And when they're undisputed, they're more credible.
That's
So
not
I'll rely on
though.
them more.
I can dispute those facts by simply saying, like, just because it says this on the contract and because this is, the spreadsheet of the numbers, you don't know what those numbers really mean. You don't know what the original intent of that contract was. You don't know the sort of backstage deals that have been made about this. You don't know all that stuff. So
Right.
you can say, hey, this contract says this and this spreadsheet says this. And I'm like, cool, that's what it says. But that's not what it means.
Well, maybe not. But,
right.
But I would argue that, and I agree that like I just got through telling you, there's no source of truth, and there's certainly no one source of truth. But
right, but that doesn't disqualify all truth. That there's no perfect truth, is what you mean.
Yeah, so that's a whole other conversation. Is does truth exist? So I basically assume that I have I have a filter through which I look at life, and I try to adjust that filter, meaning how I understand what happens around me. I try to adjust it such that it predicts things well, and it makes me happy. And if it predicts things well, it's more likely to make me happy anyway, because I'm less likely to be shocked or dismayed. I'll say, oh yeah, that's about how I thought it would go. And in that system, I assign credibility that could change any moment with new facts or new information, but I assign credibility to each bit of information. And information that is undisputed and easily verifiable and confirmed by multiple sources that all, are on multiple sides, I assign more credibility to than, say, if Trump just said that. If Trump just said, oh, these guys are not pitching in their fair share, and they were like, yeah, of course we are, and here's our numbers. Well, that would be a completely different amount of credibility. In fact, the amount of credibility
So yeah, kind of like my thing is he set that table, right? He made this an issue. He set the table and knocked over the glasses. And now people, again, 5 years after he first brought it up, we're sitting here talking about it on a podcast. And for a rhetorician, agenda setting like that is the important thing, right? So if you look back, let's go back to the other side of this with talking about Trump's personality. I'm fascinated by how you can separate out his personality from the fact that you're going to vote for this human being to lead the United States of America. I'm fascinated by that. Like, I can't do it. I can't. Have you ever had a bad boss, like a really shitty boss?
Yeah.
That's a horrible experience.
Yeah, but in that analogy, the boss would not be paying you well, would not be making sure that you had all the equipment and the staff and the teams you needed to do your job. At least in a hypothetical situation, a bad boss.
He's done that too, right? I mean, like across the government, he's removed all sorts of people. He hasn't filled jobs. He hasn't, he's changed government. He's tried to, sort of not staff government.
And he promised this from day one. He wants smaller. in general, a conservative ideal is less government, less intrusive, less laws and rules, less restrictions on how we behave, so long as we're not doing active harm to other people's ability to achieve that same thing. So if he's getting the results he wants with less staff, that's actually an attribute for
But
a
that's
good
not what the
leader.
people, the career people who do this for a living, that's not what they've said about it.
Well, of course they don't, because it's their jobs that are getting cut. What
And
do you
that's a
think they're
little
going to
easy.
say?
That's a little bit of an easy switch you just pulled on me. You know,
Well,
that they're
if
self-interested, therefore they're not saying that, you know, that you can't trust that they're saying this is bad for the country.
I'm just saying they have an incentive to protest against perhaps losing their job.
Yeah,
They
but
have an incentive.
also like all the people in the DOJ and the State Department and all these sort of career, very well respected people who are saying, hey, this is being corrupted from the inside. And it's massive amount of evidence you have of people saying that. Just saying that they're all self interested as opposed to America interested. It's a little bit of a stretch, don't you think?
You could. I don't think it's a stretch at all, necessarily, because how many of these people like Trump to begin with? And if someone has a strong aversion, if someone has TDS, how likely are they to agree with anything that he says or does? Period. Not to mention the fact that it might directly affect their livelihood or their cush job that they may or may not do
Cush
well.
job. Working cush job. That's a
Yes, I'm saying all government workers have cush jobs now.
yeah, and they don't want to lose them to Trump's leaning and reorienting of the government.
Well, no one wants to lose their job. So, I mean,
sure,
I'm
but
just saying expect
that's a
people to
very
protest even for that reason.
well, and I think that's one of the things that I, you know, as a rhetorician, I respect about the far right is that they're very good at simplifying very complicated things, and it gives people a way of making a decision. And that one, you know, they've done it over and over again, like climate scientists. Well, they don't want to lose their jobs. Trump said it about COVID, you know, hospitals. Well, they get paid when people die of COVID. You know, all this stuff about this very simple, self-interested, according to money claim they've used over and over and over again to, in rhetoric, it's called epidictic, praise or blame, to basically slander anybody that's opposing, you know, their policies.
Yeah, and I want to respond to that, but first I'm curious. I forgot to bring this up last time we talked. You mentioned the far right. How are you defining the far right? What is the far right to you?
Oh, I have a very loose definition of it. Essentially, to me, it's the way I define it. It's a collection of people who are using unethical persuasion techniques to break democracy.
Oh, that is broad.
Like I think
So it has nothing to do.
they're anti-democratic as a policy. Like they don't like democracy as a system. They feel like they've got better decisions already made that they'd like to implement, and democracy gets in their way, and so they use unethical persuasion to get there, and power.
Okay, so I'm not even sure how to think about that, because I want to make sure that if I respond to your attribution of far right, that I'm not acknowledging that that's how I feel. I don't consider
It's
Trump
tough, man. There's not a good nomenclature for talking about all these different things along the political spectrum. We've come up
Well,
with one, you know, that's directional, far left, far right, and everything in between. But that's not a great way of describing everybody.
So for me, I would say far right. In the far right uh, falls. I mean, that's the side where KKK and white supremacy and stuff like things I want no association with at all.
Yeah, it's the far
I
right.
certainly
That's
do
the
not
very
consider
edges of the
myself
right.
far right. And honestly, I don't think Trump is far right at all. In fact, I don't even think he's really a Republican.
God, somebody else said this to me last week. So somehow that's a talking point they've injected somewhere, because he's clearly on the right. Like
Well,
objectively,
you can point at certain things, but you can also point at other things that are like that's the opposite of what the right would do or a conservative would do. Now,
eh,
So name one. Let's talk about it.
Well, let's see. So if we're talking about, what are things that you think he's done that are in line with the left or democratic principles?
Oh, all the stimulus. So all the government spending, the bailouts. I mean, he's at points wanted to give more bailout money than the Democrats wanted to give. So usually the
Yeah.
Democrats are the ones that give money away to people. That's
Yeah, but
usually
I
it.
mean, come on, be realistic. That first stimulus got in because they had massive corporate money in it. They didn't care about whether it had some money for regular people.
Oh, tons of graft and corruption, and I think we can just say that's a given in any of these big giveaways. It's a given. No matter who's giving it, no matter who's receiving it, you're going to have graft and corruption. Whether it's the small businesses, the PPP, payroll protection program loans, whether it's the $1,200 checks, whether that the people get, whether it's the unemployment, whether it's the corporate side, there's been corruption documented across all of those areas. And yes, the corporate side is getting bigger chunks of money, so the total amount of money is absolutely bigger. I have no doubt.
So
whether it was
we got
giveaway,
a definitional. So this is a definitional problem. So again, in this kind of back and forth about the language, the first thing that everybody fails at, and this is why I said we need more sophisticated stuff, is nobody's got good definitions of a lot of this stuff. So you saying that you see Trump not as somebody on the right, that's a definitional issue.
Yeah. So some things, yes. So he's big military, low taxes, right? That's the right. I think we can agree on that.
Yep.
Aren't those values? I mean, he purports to have Christian values, which, I don't think I seriously doubt that many politicians at all are seriously devout in any religion, but they all have to say they are. We can agree that they all have to say they are, except maybe on the left. But even some of them, Biden says goes to church and all that. And they like to say this because it endears them to a populace who likes to think of their leaders as being religious.
Well, it's like 76%, whatever the country is, Christian, identifies as Christian.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could just look at that as purely, if 73% of the country Christian identifies as Christian or religious, well, then if I want my best chance in the election, I better identify as that too. So, I mean, to me, from a purely cynical point of view, I'd say, well, of course they're going to consider that as something to espouse.
Let me give you something, Dan, because one of the things I also want to be able to do for people when they do the podcast is give them some more thinking technology from the sort of language side. And we talked about this a little bit last time. You do a lot of equivalencies in, when you're looking at these things, where you just said like, they all do this. Okay. That's a set of equivalencies. And in fallacies, it would be a false equivalency if you're making equivalencies that aren't, valid. So I would give you a false equivalency referee flag on that one.
Okay.
I'd like to say that Trump and Biden are equally cynical about, or false in their Christianity. That one's a tough one. That's a tough sell.
Well, so it requires mind reading, doesn't it?
No, not at all. I mean, Biden has gone to church in public for 40 years.
That's going to a place. That doesn't tell you his inner thoughts.
But we don't need to know their inner thoughts to at least distinguish between what seems like somebody that has a commitment to Christianity and somebody that doesn't.
Well, as seeing someone who's willing to go to a church for 4 years, it has nothing at all. 40 years has nothing. And how long has he been in politics? 47.
Yeah, but he was a Catholic before that. I'm just saying, like, for you to put them both in the same camp and to discredit both of their Christianity at the same time, it's a fallacy. It's a false equivalency.
So let me qualify my grand blanket statements here. So anytime I say everyone, I don't mean literally every last one. I don't mean that literally there are no devout Christians or Muslims or whatever, no devout religious people in politics. I don't mean that at all. I just mean, if I had to bet money, 90+% of them, it's mostly for show.
Well, that doesn't make sense in our population. If the population is almost 80% Christian, then politicians are also 80% Christian.
Well, how do you know the population isn't saying that for show?
Yeah, I mean, we can go down, logic rabbit holes and play, seesaw forever. The important part for me is when you look at this and you say, okay, so let's go back to our original part here, which is Trump is, we're trying to define Trump, and you have said that you don't see him as far right, and a lot of people do see him as far right.
Not by my definition, absolutely not.
Right. And you don't see him as a toxic, dangerous personality. You see him as a noxious personality.
Yes, because danger has real risk, and that risk can be named and shown and demonstrated. So that's how I would just on the fly define danger. So, yes, I agree. He's noxious, bullying.
And you don't care. You don't mind having a noxious bully representing the country to the
I'm
world.
okay with that if it means I get better results for the country from him versus another person.
Yeah, and I think most people would say that. Oh, this guy's, like if you see somebody's an introvert, right? Like they don't talk well in public. Hillary Clinton had this problem. She wasn't a good public communicator. A lot of people would argue that, she spent so much time in government and she was so wonky that she would have made a good president on that side, the governing side, but she was terrible at the inspiration side.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's I want to convert. I don't want to convert you away from Trump, but let's say this.
I'm totally open to being converted. I'm completely open to it.
Well, and my whole impetus for this is part of what I'm trying to get to is I want a country that is, and you probably do too. We're probably not far off on the definition of what we want from, to live in this country. I want it to be fun. I want it to be safe. I want it to be innovative and progressive and to value education and, all these things that make a place really cool to live.
A place you're proud of too.
Proud of, I don't care. I care that it's a good place to live.
Okay, good.
That it's just you walk down the street and you're like, they're cool people. There's lots of interesting things to do. You're safe. There's not a bunch of anxiety and dissonance and danger in the world.
Yeah, I'm on board 100% with you.
So to me, what when you look at making decisions, you look at sort of mega elements down to micro elements. And I think you're more of a micro guy. Like you're a thinker, like I said. So you go down into a lot of the micro stuff and you want to find evidence and work your way through things that way. A lot of people these days are sort of more mega. And the mega decision about Trump has been, especially from the left. My 78-year-old mother, who's a very moderate person, hates him because of the way he talks and because, she doesn't really, I don't think, track any of the policies.
Yep.
But you're able to make that split and not use ethos as your decision. You're trying to use logos or logic as your decision base.
So to me, well, let me ask you, doesn't logic get us closer to accuracy and truth than emotion does?
Well, not necessarily. What's happened right now from a theoretical perspective that I'm going to have a full webinar series on this, probably a full course because it's so complicated. But what the right has done, the far right, I would argue that the far right has moved in and is living inside, the body of the right now. And they have imported a ton of very potent communication techniques. And one of them is to what I would call skew logic. So it's a facade world or a skewed world where it sounds like logic and it has a lot of shared things with logic, but it's now not logic. So information becomes dangerous in this kind of world because you can see guys even like you who are very, good thinkers and care about coming to good conclusions.
Falling for it.
Well, it's not even falling for it. It's you're using information that, has been taken through a different system.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult, especially with people who have no training in epistemology or, logic or, anything real about sophisticated techniques to discern this stuff. There's a lot of smart people who haven't been trained who are going down these rails, and I watch them, and I'm like, you really shouldn't be going down that rail. Let me slow you down a little bit and give you some things that'll, keep you from going down into skewed logic.
And I agree 100% that this happens on the right and on the left as well. In fact,
See, there's a
I
false
would argue.
equivalency. You're instantly pulling me back into a false equivalency
No, how is that false?
because it's totally different than the right and the left. Now you can say the left makes mistakes, and you can say,
No, I say they intentionally use those same tools you just named. I'll
What?
give you examples.
oh, they don't. They absolutely don't. They may make mistakes. They make logic flaws,
Do
but they
all
don't
of
skew
their
logic.
Okay, so
Not a
give me an
programmatic
example of
skewing of
skewed
logic.
that
Huh?
you've seen the right do. What's an example of skewed logic that you've seen the right do or use? I want to understand this because I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and most people don't, but it's one of those things that you've got to illuminate so the smart people can see it, because it's complicated. But let's talk about the election that just happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so anybody who gets up and says there's corruption and flawed, machinery and deep state, it's completely skewed logic.
Meaning they haven't
Completely
presented evidence
untrue.
for it? Is that what you mean?
What?
Do you mean it's skewed logic because they have not presented credible evidence for that claim? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's one of the things you can find that will create skewed logic. It's all claim, no evidence.
Oh, okay.
But it's still
Okay.
reported, and it's still said in public by
Yeah.
people with power and access to the media.
So let me ask you this, Dan. Apart from what's been said, do you feel like there has been corruption in this, since you brought it up, in this election on any scale? In any way, whether it's a neighbor found my ballot, sent it in, or whether election software was hacked, or ballots were dumped. I don't care. Whatever claim anyone wants to make. Do you personally feel like any election fraud has happened in this election on any scale?
So are you asking me, like, are there flaws in the way people vote and the way votes are sometimes
Not flaws,
cast and
not
stuff like that? Or are you talking about
not a machine broke.
a conscious conspiracy to, create bad votes?
And intentionally, something that was done intentionally, or multiple episodes of things that were done intentionally, that were fraudulent in this election, intended to change the outcome.
So again, it's not my area of expertise.
Yeah, but you're just making an educated guess as someone who lives and breathes in the world. What is the likelihood? Let's put a percentage on it. What's the likelihood that any election fraud happened?
Yeah, it's not an educated guess. I'm not going to avoid your question. I'm going to answer your question, but it's not an educated guess. I don't know anything about elections.
Well, but I gave you a simple on any scale. Any scale, Dan. That could be one vote that someone filed fraudulently. So that should be easy to call.
What?
Out of almost 200 million votes, were any of them cast fraudulently? What would you put money on? Yes or no?
I don't know. I have no idea. Like where
I'm sitting. This.
Huh?
You can think through this.
No, I really can't. Thinking. What I can do, and this is why skew logic is so important. And again, I'll have a full course on this, because me thinking that I can think through this is a false concept.
You can handicap it.
No, I can't. I can guess, and I can make myself sound smart, make myself feel smart. What I can do is look at, and this goes back to ethos, why ethos is so important these days. I can look at the people who are experts in this, valid experts. And again, I got to decide what that means to me. And I can say, that's what they've said, ergo I believe it.
Right.
And from everything I've seen from every election official who seems, to have done this for a long time, there's absolutely no scale fraud at all in this election.
I agree. Every expert has said that. And the experts should know, right? I mean, they are the experts.
So again, we're doing skew logic, right? I can feel like you're coming up with an uppercut
You see me winding up?
about to discredit my experts.
No, no, no. I won't. I mean, I could go there, but I'm not even going to go there. I'm just
Okay. So finish where are you going?
So basically, here's how. In a system where we cannot know everything, which is every system.
Everywhere, everything.
Yep. So that's a given. Now, it's kind of like the old question: how many piano tuners are there in LA? Now, there's no way I could know that. There's no way you could know that, but we could get probably pretty close if we just started following a logic trail. We could say, what does LA have? 10 million people? I'm just going to guess. I have no idea. 10 million people. How many people out of 100 have pianos? Well, let's see. I know maybe 1,000 people, and let's say 3 of them have pianos. And you can kind of break it down like that. You could say, how many pianos would a piano tuner probably have to tune to stay in business and in a year? And you might say, oh, he has to tune 50 pianos a year. You can arrive at a number that's pretty damn close to accurate just by doing that kind of thing. And that's what I do with, you brought up the election. I can do that with the election and election fraud. So let's look at do you want to hear my little logic trail?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
it's all skew logic, but go for it.
Well, but it's the best we have as non-experts who are not omniscient.
Right. And I would say it's not the best we have. Like, if you're actually doing logic on this, what you're trying to do, have you taken logic classes?
No.
They would ding you horribly. You would fail the course until you fixed your logic flow. Like syllogisms, basically, you can't go from a statement to the next statement until you've proved the first statement completely true, because that means you're putting flaw in your logic trail all the way along, and you'll get to a flawed conclusion.
So my piano tuner example, did I do that?
Yeah, because you're assuming a lot of stuff and you're giving me some type of numerical data from these assumptions. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have perfect logic in order to say things. And smart people can approximate good logic like you're doing. And you can walk down the trail and you can generally be okay. But if we actually go back into it, now you're trying to move over, a very simple, hypothetical you just did about piano tuners. You're going to move that over now into elections, which are incredibly complicated.
I agree. Yeah, go ahead.
And you would not be allowed to go down these trails.
So I'm not trying to prove anything. That may be the difference here. What I'm trying to do is get as close to a working understanding of things as I can, using let's not even call it logic. Let's just call it critical thinking. I don't know what all these terms. I don't know what the pure definitions are. But if I got close to, if I got within a couple hundred of the number of piano tuners in LA using my loose kind of logic path, and it helps if it's close enough to help me make a decision about whether I want to become a piano tuner or not, then it was useful.
Yeah, and useful. Again, I'm not requiring you to be perfect. I think that's that's also an argument flaw, that nobody can talk unless they're perfect. That's not what I'm suggesting. So let me do something here. Let me jump you to your conclusion, so you don't have to take me all the way through the election trail. What's your view of that? Do you think there was wide scale fraud?
So the widespread term you picked up from the mainstream media, I guarantee, because no one made a claim that there was widespread election fraud. The claim was that there was targeted election fraud in the swing states. That was the claim. Now, the news media switched it instantly to widespread. So basically, they're mischaracterizing the claim and then, quote, debunking their mischaracterization.
Again, you're sort of jumping across lily pads here, but I give it to you. Fine.
Okay.
Widespread.
So
Okay.
in answer
Do
to
you
your
think there was
question,
targeted fraud in these swing states?
I think it's likely. And the only reason is because number one, the stakes are so high, higher than ever, one could argue, because we have Hitler in the White House and we don't want him again. I mean, he's literally been called Hitler. So understandably, your motivation, if you were considering fraud, would be higher. I mean, who wouldn't want to kill Hitler if you had the chance, or at least break a law to
Okay.
keep
So
Hitler from killing the
you're
Jews?
going after the motivation of the left, that they're highly motivated to cheat.
More so than in other election years. Can we agree on that?
I don't know. I mean, during the war, people were trying to get, Johnson out and Nixon out and stuff like that. So there's often a very heated election going on in this country.
In our lifetimes, has there been a president more hated by the left? And again, these are things we can't know, Dan. I'm
No,
saying this
he's
understanding.
roundly hated. Totally give you
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Thoroughly
So,
hated.
so we can
So
say
again,
there's.
you're working back from certain things to get to your claim. So I'm
I'm just
curious,
looking
like,
for
so
a
you think
likelihood. A likelihood.
you're just giving me sort of like from the logical, things that you're pulling out here, you see some reason to believe that there could be targeted fraud,
Yes, I think
but you
it's
haven't seen any
entirely possible.
evidence.
Now,
You're an
is it
inference.
enough? Is it enough to change the outcome? No idea. No idea. In fact, I would, if I had to bet $5 on it, I would say probably not enough. But the motivation is higher than it's ever been, I believe. It's also totally possible because no one can say that a computer can't be hacked. I mean,
Again,
the
that
CIA has
that
been
I'm going to
hacked.
stop you on your logic trail because you and I don't know those softwares. We don't know the way those machines are protected. We don't
All
know the
right.
backup systems.
Could we assume that the CIA knows a little bit about hacking? And if so, why have they been hacked? And wouldn't they have one of the best unhackable systems in the world? CIA, FBI has been hacked, Department of Justice been hacked.
Yeah, but again, you're sort of you're working backwards from inductive and deductive claims. Okay, so the deductive claim that all computers can be hacked, yes, we all would probably agree with that.
Okay.
That's a given. I give you that. But now you're
Okay.
working down into sort of specifics, applications of that deductive principle, and you're falling out of the logic flow.
So if all computers could be hacked, theoretically,
All politicians
and
can cheat in an election. So
yeah,
these are statements that are true.
yeah.
Can you go any farther than that is the question. And the only way to go farther than that is to start looking at every statement you make and break it apart for its truth value.
Yeah, so I'm not saying the election was hacked. Just to be clear, I am not saying that. I'm saying if there was an election year where there was a bigger scale of hacking of an election, I think in my lifetime, I think this would absolutely be the year. That would be my wager. And
That enough to put a little pry bar in your head and not think that this election was 100% valid?
well, it's undecided. It's as yet to be decided. So I'm not going to make a decision until the verdict is in. So that's the thing that's going on now is all
So
these claims are being
I want to tell you, I
evaluated.
really appreciate how good you are at having this discussion, by the way. Like, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm trying to pull this back to so that we don't get lost in content that my interest in all of this is to try to teach people some concepts that'll be useful as they go into this stuff themselves. And I really appreciate how good you are about letting me interrupt you and pull stuff.
Oh no, Dan, you're great, man. And I think I told you last time, I've been dying to have a civil, thoughtful conversation just like this, where I can debunk my own bugs and debug my own thinking, because I know I have bugs in my thinking program. I know I do. We all do. And any chance I have to debug it the way I think, the better off my thinking process will be. So I like to be wrong, and I like active to do that to find if I'm wrong. I have to actively put my belief system up to scrutiny and have other people with more knowledge and a different perspective. It's science. That's what science is, right? Science is get a hypothesis, do a test, and then put it up on the internet so everyone else can pick it apart and see if it's valid or not.
Yeah, science. There's a lot. Like again, all the my training in the epistemology and logic and things like that make this. I don't like to sort of haul that mechanisms, all those things out on people very often because it's not the point. The point is like as you're going through the world as a either thinking person or emotion person or story person, I try to pull out as generally helpful things as I can. And my thing is always to drive people towards that vision that I said. Is this a nice country? Are we being as nice as we can? Are we being safe and effective and all that kind of stuff? My thing about ultimately about Trump is from day one, even before he got in, he is not just disruptive, he's obnoxious and difficult. And that's not a good America. I don't want to live in an obnoxious, difficult America. And
Right.
so for me, like I said very early on, his ethos lost for me. And it's
Yeah.
fascinating to me, that other people don't react to him, like that with that kind of intensity. So when I come to this stuff, like I said, I really appreciate that you'll take time to go down through your logic. And I see really good thinking here, but I also see flawed thinking. And some of that is because the skewed far right machine, it's been fired up and used so well since the emergence of cable media and social media that it's really gotten into the American brain, and we're having really hard time thinking through it. And so
I agree
it's
100%.
concerning to me, like when I see good people and thoughtful people still going off into this theme park over here, the skewed logic theme park. And I'm like, guys, come back over here, come back over here and I'll clean that up for you. And then you can look at it, like just the huge, massive, claim about fraud in this election and all that's never been done before. Nobody's ever
Right.
launched at an election like that, especially as a president.
How
And it's
many,
totally
this is
new.
20, how many times you heard the word unprecedented this year? 2020. That should be
Yeah.
the buzzword of the year.
And to me, it's just reality show entertainment principles. He just finds the sore
Yeah.
spot and just
Yeah.
pushes on it. But it's dangerous, from a
Well, I
public
agree.
discourse perspective. It's very dangerous.
I agree. There is some danger, but it feels to me like you don't see, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I see that on the right. I also see it on the left. In fact, to me, the left, part of the reason I voted for Trump is because the left pissed me off so badly throughout this whole thing. They could have taken the high road, and they totally didn't. And I always want to think of, if I'm picking a side, that they're the mostly good side, because why else would I pick them if they were not the mostly good side? Assuming they all have flaws and other motivations, they're human. Um, but they just went off the rails, in my opinion,
Well,
including.
that's another big, farm of worms. That statement that you saw this as the left being obnoxious and toxic.
Not in the same way as Trump. Trump, in some ways, is so transparent. He's gonna be unpredictable. He's gonna. Yeah, I mean, if you read his book, Art of the Deal, everything he does is written in there. We all have his playbook, and he follows it to a T. So it's not like we should be shocked or surprised by anything he does. He's always going to walk away from the deal at the last second. He's always going to threaten something really big so he can get something smaller. I mean, this is all in his fucking book.
Yeah, but
the left,
that's a business negotiation book, and that's not. Now he's messing with entire countries right now and real lives and all this. Nobody signed up and said, "Hey, I want Donald Trump to come in and drag America into the art of the deal."
Yes, but he's using those. That's part of his leadership style. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. It's
okay. So I don't want to. Like we've been talking for an hour and 15, so I want to. I want to get us to an end point. So many
is this
things.
going to be a 12-part series?
it's endless. Like the stuff, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
And to me, again, my whole purpose is to try to clean people's, two things: clean their thought process as much as I can to give them some equipment for thinking, and then definitely clean up the public discourse, the way that we are talked to. Because
Yeah.
unless we can make that clean and we can rely on the information we're getting from politicians and leaders and experts, then we don't have a chance to ever see,
Yes.
honesty and truth.
Yes. I want exactly that. And that's one of my top reasons I voted for Trump, actually, is for that very reason. So
That you
maybe
think
this is
there's more
something.
truth on the Trump side?
Um, the it's more
Uh,
that I
Dan,
won't
you're
even say
lost and
more truth.
skewed. You're lost in the
No,
skewed
no, no,
theme
no,
part,
no.
bro.
No, I'll go ahead and tell you, Trump fails the fact checks all the time. So I don't care as much about the kind of small lies that are obviously like self-aggrandizing, or optimistic lies, or directionally correct but factually incorrect. I don't care as much about those. I would care much more about lies that, for example, demonize half the country and put a target on half the country's back.
Okay, so I'm going to stop us just because you've pulled up like 3 new issues. And like one of the things I'm going to lay out for people is the sort of the playbook of the skewers, so that you can
Ooh,
see it, because I see it. I see the
we
end
should have a
product of it.
barbecue.
Huh?
We should have barbecue with all those skewers.
Yeah, there you go. But I see the end product. I hear the statements that are talking points that have been handed down from think tanks all the way down to Dan from Seattle talking to me at on a Tuesday afternoon. And these aren't things that you came up with on your own. They're things that have been traveled down through media and traveled down through social media. And I'm really curious as to what the world looks like if we didn't have that, if we did have
Yeah.
people doing independent thinking without
Yeah.
that kind of, given thinking. So a lot of things to work through. Again, man, I super appreciate how good you are talking about this. We'll circle back around at some point.
Yeah, I'm game, man. I am down for sure. Wonderful chatting with you as always, Dan. And man, if you ever want to do this again or follow up on any of these things, I'm your guy. I'm
All
in.
right. Sounds good, bro. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right.
See ya.
See ya.